Hello, Peter. How are you?
Hello, Enrique. I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. Tell me, are you having some incredible guests again today?
We have an awesome guest coming in, and I can't wait just to introduce her this time. But first of all, thank you everyone for coming again to our interview. We're still having some issues. Jesus Christ, this is every day is more complicated with the technology. It should be the other way around, right?
No worries, no worries. Technology will just one day will kill us, that's for sure. It's already guaranteed, but that's okay. This streaming will be just going live soon, so hope by this date it will be all fixed. So that's the streaming, so it's normal part.
Okay, so let's see if our guest can help us with technology in morning construction industry. So no more overdue. Shakira, welcome to the BIM Cafe.
Thank you very much, Enrique. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you being with us. Thank you for taking the challenge of the technology with us. So that's good because I think this is the one part of your topic as well. It's about the information management, information technology maybe. So and technology overall. So I think you really fits well today with the current topic.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Fantastic. So let's introduce more or less the structure of the interview we have on board, and we will give the floor to Shakira to introduce herself. So Shakirah Akinwale, I hope I pronounce it correctly. I'm sorry if I don't. We're gonna run through after her presentation. We put these three main points: technology as an enabler, information management as a base, and then seeking for a social impact. This kind of structure moving forward and related to what Shakira does, Shakira did, and Shakira is doing in the construction industry. So now, Shakira, I give you the floor. This is a small summary of yourself to it publicly. I hope it's all right. And tell us, who are you?
No, thank you very, very much. So, yes, as it said here, I am a proud techie. I studied architecture and architectural technologies. Really, I got into buildings because I've always seen them as this connection that we have to the sort of wider environment. And they can really kind of make or break us in a sense that it can either enhance our quality of living or it can really disrupt it. So, I've also always been someone who's carried technology as an enabler for us to be able to achieve these better quality properties, but also to help us unlock our power with regard to the information that we use to make certain decisions and also to be able to actually achieve this better quality of life that we're all basically looking for. So I started out, actually, I studied architecture, went into, I'd call it sort of design management, and then I transitioned quite quickly into the sort of commercial team. There I actually learned quantity surveying, and ironically I did that through what I'd call sort of process engineering. So I literally went in and I wanted to understand, for instance, why certain specifications perhaps were being removed later on down the line that actually would potentially enhance the quality or improve the compliance. And what I found was actually a lot of that came down to sort of various understandings and different ideas about a risk. There was also, again, how do we measure things? So I actually got into quantity surveying by helping the commercial team leverage technology and information to sort of streamline and automate their measuring and also specifying. So that's my, I would say, background in a nutshell. I stepped out of the industry during, so 2017, Grenfell happened, which was a terrible fire that happened in West London, Kensington and Chelsea borough. And it's something that really hit me. I was working as a project manager at the time. And I honestly just felt as though, as an industry, we needed and we had to be doing better. But also, that was a point for me to start to decide, okay, I have more of a responsibility here, and there's more that I can actually do. So I can pick the problems that I would choose to focus in on. So where I decided to focus in on was, again, making sure, for instance, from a social resident, so with regards to homes and properties, especially, that owners and landlords have the right information they need right from the beginning, which at the end of the day also affect the residents and the tenants who will eventually use and occupy these buildings. But these things needed to be considered right at the foundations, right from the beginning. And that's where, again, the whole idea of sort of building information modeling and understanding, right, what do we need to request and put in place right at the beginning, and looking at tying in the sort of sustainability and health and safety compliance aspects into that, and I would guess their sort of investment and business strategy and portfolio as well. So I realized at that point that the buck really stopped and started with the client. But how do we inform the client when a lot of the time, and when we talk about, building information modeling or just information in general, clients for the most part, they're at the mercy of their sort of consultants and the contractors that they appoint to basically challenge them and help them to understand what their particular needs are. So I've spent quite a lot of time recently, I would say, working to understand what motivates clients from, again, a sort of senior leadership perspective, their business strategy, their portfolio management and their particular goals, and how they allocate certain funds with regards to, again, implementing this as part of their, their resident safety strategy, fire strategy as well in terms of safety, again, who they work with as well. So qualifying consultants and supply chain is also so important. And yeah, I'll probably kind of deviate a bit slightly, but actually I wanted to just touch upon one of the other aspects, which is the angel investing. So for the past few years, I've also been working in, I'd call it the sort of tech startup ecosystem. And a lot of that came about through, the introduction of prop tech and construction tech into our industries. Now, we all understand the importance of money, funding. Money makes the world go around. We're not really going to be able to, develop some of the technologies that we need to be able to achieve net zero without the right investment and funding. So I got into angel investment because I wanted to understand how I can also contribute from a financial perspective, how I can influence other sort of resident funds or real estate funds rather, and even family funds as well, to actually allocate more of their investment and their capital to technologies for good, but also things like past 2035 retrofitting. So this is getting buildings up to net zero and net carbon standards, but also in terms of actually training clients and their organizations so that they understand what they need to put in place from a compliance, ESG, so environmental, social, and governance perspective that will actually benefit them and their end users, that is the tenants, leaseholders, residents, even their their regulators, so the people that they need to comply with, the planners, building regulations, building insurance, all of these people really and truly, they have to serve the same information to a lot of the time. And yeah, all of it really comes back down to their whole sort of business goals and how these things define how they move forward as an organization.
Okay, one thing. So that was really just the wake up call for you was the incident, which is of course very unhappy things for the families and for the world. We learn all of it across Europe about the about the incident. I'm sorry. And one of the things which is really just interesting, what you see, it looks like you have the very comprehensive approach to the whole problem. You haven't really looked at only from the pure engineering perspective or architect perspective, but also you look at the social part, etc., etc. So it's very interesting to see how you did it. So is there any connections with BIM at the end, with the building information modeling? It's just how you just make the connection of these two?
Yeah, so one could say that I've almost transitioned from working sort of really in the industry to working on it. So I've had a bit of a wider context and being able to see, okay, let's say even we have the REBA plan of works, for instance, which I would call it the sort of overall framework to an extent of methodology that we follow mostly, I'd say, in the UK. And that covers all the way from, like appraisal, design development, planning stages to construction, procurement, and even down to sort of handover and in use. And at each of those different stages, there are information requirements that each of the different parties need to provide and coordinate per each gateway. So from, let's say, a client perspective, in those earlier stages, the brief, so just even that, initiation document, the business case, that really is feeding into even what goes into, let's say, the asset information requirements, or even the project information requirements. And if these things aren't put in place and clear right at the beginning, then when it comes to the supply chain responding to that with, let's say, their BIM execution plans, what they're doing eventually is just box ticking. So to tie in the BIM, I would say, or rather, probably even saying the BIM is probably even wrong. Let's pick that apart. So obviously there is a misconception to an extent about BIM in general. You know, it's building information modeling. We sometimes play around and call it sort of better information modeling or better information management. In my opinion, it's a combination of a methodology, so a way of working, but also outputs, right? And we say information and not data. So data can kind of just exist, whereas information has to serve a purpose, again, in my opinion. So
wow, I'm impressed. I'm impressed. Sorry for just interrupting you again, but very interesting point of view, and I think we completely with Enrico agree with that. He was grilling me for the season 1 when I was learning about BIM. What's about the information and visualization, etc., etc. So he was grilling me for the whole season about this. So I completely agree with you. But one of the things which is interesting, what you're mentioning here, Shakirah, is just that it should serve the purpose. And what we are looking at right now, I do not see that really a lot of people have just sharing your point of view. Just some guys are just using it to fulfill the regulatory or just the BEAT requirements, saying I need to have the BIM object, so let me just do this because some of the RFP required this, but they don't see any benefits of using it at the end. So that's what we're seeing on the market right now.
I definitely understand that. And it's funny, it reminds me of a conversation I had recently with an architect. And I asked him, what he thinks about BIM effectively. And he described it as, oh yeah, it's a great way to help us coordinate. And, he's thinking about it from his perspective as an architect. And I think sometimes that is the issue in how building information modeling was introduced. Everyone has their own relationship with it, but they're not necessarily thinking about it in the context of let's say, the life cycle of this development, which the client does, and the end user ends up having to, pay for, as a result, whether it benefits them or is something that affects them negatively. So you're absolutely right. And, in some cases, some people call building information modeling Revit or ArchiCAD, or to them, it's a 3D visualization. But actually, with the information, and the information, again, at this point, we're talking about digital information, structured information, information that is parsable, which means then that information can be manipulated into various views and interfaces, etc. So you can extract a visual from the right information, but you can't extract information from just a visual model, because effectively that's just a slightly different model. So I think what it really comes down to is understanding, right, it's information modeling, and information must serve a purpose. So you're either asking a question and trying to find some kind of insight or make a decision, or you're informing, again, for a purpose. And that purpose is either, it's for safety, it's for compliance, it's for something. And then with that, the people who, let's say, are, so again, you have the client who might ask for building information modeling, and then you've got the suppliers in between. So you've got the architects who have to buy certain software to develop certain things. So they feel a certain ownership to what they're creating in there too. So they don't want to share certain things. You've got the engineers who also have to buy a certain, bit of software to be able to interact again with this similar model. But what they don't necessarily always understand or are on the same page with is they're actually handing this information over to the client. So they don't own it. They're creating it and developing it for the benefit of that client. And that client needs to be able to understand that for the benefit of their end users and their various stakeholders. Everyone else in between now are basically users to an extent, like enablers. We're part of the story of the journey, but we're not the benefactors or the beneficiaries, if that makes sense. So we have a responsibility. And I think if we unpack and really understand that responsibility, then we start to really understand, okay, what do I specifically have to do in this journey and in this context to also make sure that firstly, I'm not even, I would say even spending, let's say, more than I might need to as an organization. So let's say as an architecture studio, there's perhaps, you know, the design elements, maybe some commercial elements as well. We're talking about the quantity surveyors and the cost managers. We want to be able to, you know, link these things to like BCIS, which is, well, it's like a international sort of cost matrix, if that makes sense, that can literally plug out like live outputs. And we want to be able to connect all of these things, but it's not necessarily for the benefit of the architect or the QS or, you know, the engineer. Again, it's really for the benefit of the clients and the end users. And I think changing that whole mindset is tricky. It's happening. I think it's being further complicated, if I'm being really honest, by all of the sort of technology vendors kind of coming in and, you know, selling technology as though it in and of itself is a solution and it's just going to come in and you click a button and, oh yeah, everything's sort of done for you. So I do think there's a few mentality changes that definitely need to happen in our industry. Firstly, even just with regards to, you know, our sense of ownership with certain things. I've had genuine conversations with certain architects where I've had to almost remind them, you know, this isn't your building, right? Like, you know, you need to commission to design this. But yeah, I'll stop there.
That's very interesting what you're saying, and I think Enrique he just echo it right now because he was on the one of the biggest trade shows, the construction trade shows in Madrid this week, and so we saw the very similar approach. Like some of the guys were just saying that the BIM for them on all of the information technology part of the construction was like a ticking the box, saying just, oh yeah, we got it, we have it already, we don't want to talk, we know everything about it. And from the other side, you have the group of the manufacturers and the people who are just don't even want to think about it. They said, you know, guys, we selling our products for the last 30 years. We will be selling for another 30. They just don't talk us about the modeling, about the BIM models, etc. We don't want to know about it. We selling the easy stuff. So just please do not come and do not talk about it. Which again, I would like to challenge this view, and I think you really echo it just a second ago, because that's the whole optimization of the supply chain and the way how we can just work on it. That's the benefits for the globe, in fact, for humanity, right? And that's not only for the construction industry, because if you can just optimize this billion-dollar industry to a couple of the percent, we can just use this money somewhere else. I'm amazed about this.
I agree, and do you know, it's just yesterday I was thinking about this, and actually there's quite a lot to unpack there. So let's say another aspect of building information modeling which has kind of shot itself in the foot sometimes, it's, you know, I have conversations sometimes with manufacturers, other engineers, people who aren't, let's say, the designers, engineers, consultants, who almost feel as though they don't have a role to play when it comes to building information modeling. Not always, but a lot. So one of the other areas that I know, for instance, what are they called? HG Bailey were really, really keen on. I was speaking with a guy called Stuart a couple of years ago, and I was looking at the retail aspect, right? And where, as an industry, we like to reinvent the wheel. You said something, Peter, actually, that I haven't touched upon, but it's to do with, as an industry, we need to change our mindset from being like, oh, we have all of the answers and we know what to do, to actually, let's figure this out and let's learn and let's share what we've learned and let's share the failures and the successes so that we can do it better. But what we have is there's almost like a flat arrogance of, oh, we know what we're doing, we've done it like this, let's kind of keep doing it, right? So when building information modeling, you know, was kind of introduced, it was introduced mostly from a sort of design engineering perspective, and everything else sort of kind of fit into that. Now, what you also have is, obviously, you've got things like design for manufacture and assembly, which is already really quite, I'd say, quite agile and quite, you know, engineer focused, and in a sense plugs in really well with this. But where you know, you have supply chains for people who are actually supplying some of these things, who aren't necessarily the engineers or manufacturers who've been, you know, used to those product development ways of working and life cycles. They're coming in, and all they want to really do is keep selling, you know, their materials, their equipment, their furniture, so on and so forth, because right now that's what benefits them. At the end of the day, all of these things cost. So you can have, you know, a retail or a building merchant who has models of every single one of their components. You can also have, you know, a builder's merchant who has tagged every single one of their products. So they don't necessarily need a model, but you're still able to find all of the information that you need to be able to find about that particular piece of equipment or fitting or fixture down to nails, based on just recording, let's say it's I don't know, it's barcode, etc. And it's things like this where we need to be able to cross-pollinate across different industries and sectors instead of reinventing the wheel, right? But that's only going to happen by acknowledging our gaps. So, you know, when we have the likes of, okay, this amazing model that's, okay, it's been built, and now we want to start to actually get it constructed, we now have the issue of there are only so many contractors right now that are BIM enabled, right? In a sense that they can actually take that as an input and run with that efficiently without having to almost potentially go back and forth and do all kinds of things. You also have scenarios again where, you know, that client may not even have that, and let's say their pre-construction information is all very manual and traditional and paper-based, but the contractor themselves might be BIM enabled. And in those instances, they tend to take on the responsibility of trying to almost level up that client, but it's usually at their cost. So that benefits the larger contractors, you know, the Maces, the Kias, who have, to an extent as well, they sometimes even are starting to have their own funds and venture studios because they understand the importance of, you know, research, development, the property technologies that are coming in, and how it can start to streamline and optimize all of our like processes and effectively make us more productive, help us save money, time, which ultimately saves the client as well and allows. So yeah, it's all just connecting the dots, I would say.
No, I think that's you made again the perfect comparison. So I really appreciate. I think the connecting the dots here. I will rather also just think about it, the breaking the silo, because, you know, I was on the different conference 3 weeks ago when I was started talking to the different groups of people, so just the architect, the construction companies, the manufacturers. I had the feeling that they living in their own kind of world. They don't want to just get out, and they just saying I'm sufficient and with my information, with my technology, with my BIM objects, etc. And I just, when I start asking the questions to the architects, saying just, are you guys start to looking for some of the designs, you know, when you're preparing your conceptual and artistic vision of the world, are you start to pulling some of the models to make sure that you can just do this faster, so you can do the design faster? And they just, one of the answers was really shocked me, saying just, I'm not for, I don't want to see this kind of things because I'm conceptually, I'm architect, but, you know, and I asked him, you know, okay, I understood this, but if you will just prepare I think that was the questions about the water tank or the fire, the fire tank with the preparations for the sprinklers, etc. If you know that your ceiling will be 10 centimeters down and you design it right now, you need to rework it afterwards anyway. So why are you not using this opportunity? I said, no, that's not my part. I don't want to learn these things. So I see the silo really coming there, and maybe this is because maybe I don't understand it. I'm not an architect, so I don't understand this. But that's something potentially which we need to change a little bit, I think, at least in my opinion.
That is a difficult one, as in one of the barriers to digital adoption and digital transformation that isn't often spoken about is the people who just don't want to adopt digital. And ironically, that's where I feel technology can play such a huge role, in that how we interface or pass data doesn't have to be in one particular format. So there are people who just prefer to draw things all day long, and they prefer to draw on something physical. We have tablets and interfaces for that. There are people who prefer to speak and, just engage in verbal dialogue. We have text to speech to text, and all kinds of AI type things now that can, change those. So I think part of it is also we sometimes, bring in technology as a barrier because we only bring it in one way, as opposed to really understanding the situation and the people and the outcomes and the pains and the problems, and then applying something. So to those, I would say it's going to be a transition, and change, as we know, happens slowly and it happens in layers. So I think the biggest thing is getting their buy-in into the journey. So understanding, okay, like, what do they really value in what they do, and demonstrating to them how technology as an enabler can help them do more of that thing that they value and love doing.
Yep.
Otherwise, it will always just seem as though it's this thing coming to kind of displace them or change, how they do things. And actually, we're not changing that much. We want to enhance, really. We want to connect. We want to uncover, especially where things are obscure. So, and that, being someone that studied architecture, when we talk about design thinking and innovation and creativity, engineering, all of these things are really to do with solving problems. So, an architect who really is just, I guess, not about solving problems or creating value has potentially lost his way as well, his or her way, I should say. That being said, it is a tough one, but we all have a
I understood.
responsibility.
That's pretty revolutionary. So just, I'm just wow. Okay. I hear you.
Yeah, it reminds me when we have a talk with Ignacio Piotr. You remember that he was calling himself ex-architect because he felt that the purpose of all his studies and everything was already gone when you went out of to the market, right? And this is it makes you think about it. And I want to take a point that you mentioned, Shakira, and it really rang a bell on me, is the arrogance on the sector. It is true that I experienced this. Let's say it's like a pyramidal structure, so people only will listen to the ones above, no same level or below. And unfortunately, I don't know here in Spain mainly, but I don't know in the UK or other countries, on the top part, less companies are and bigger and more powerful, right? So at the end, this power of making a change came to 1, 2, 3, 4 CEOs, which will be listened by all of them team and all the companies below that structure. I don't know. What do you think about that? I do believe that this is a generational thing. We need to change the generations who are managing those companies to make it not pyramidal, just I don't know, very structural, vertical, right? So because many companies above are pushing for digitalization, for innovation, but mostly they are 2, 3, 4, 5 guys, young people, new women coming into the industry, but the voice, 10,000 people screaming, "We want BIM or we want digital." Those 5 CEOs, they don't lift a finger, it won't happen, right? So this comes to the arrogance that you said.
Cool. So there's two parts that I'm seeing to that. There's, let's say, the larger organization and the sort of change and transformation required in there. So so yeah, there's that bit, and then what I'd say the sort of wider industry perspective, where you've got the larger players and you've got basically the supply chain, who's mostly made up of the SMEs. So touching on the first part, and actually they're kind of mirrored in a sense of one's a bit more entrepreneurial and one's a bit more intrapreneurial, as in you're in an organization and you potentially have to think in the same way of testing and trialing things to be able to then demonstrate the value and outcome, to then sort of prove a particular business case and then have the organization move forward. So with that first one, what I would say is change obviously is slow and it's a difficult pill to swallow. For those larger organizations that I would say the majority, let's say in the leadership, there is that iceberg of ignorance that's often mentioned, where at the top, there's only really so much that you can kind of see, as the sort of layers or levels kind of cascade. So anyone who is in those organizations and is potentially frustrated with regards to, okay, we're talking about these changes that we would like, but we're not really embedding them, or we're not putting in place what we need to actually move forward. I think that's the case of looking at things like actually social responsibility or corporate social responsibility, and being able to tie that into their business case as an organization, because that way then you can start to speak to, okay, what are our investors asking us for? Because more investors nowadays are starting to be a bit more clued on with regards to all of these things. And again, you can map it down to sort of the ESG reporting and benchmarking of it all. But when we're talking about digital transformation and just transformation in general, it's to boost and improve productivity. It's to improve transparency. It's to boost and improve the economy. It's to do all of these things that really and truly is for the benefit of that organization as well as the industry. So as long as it can actually be spoken to in that particular way and connected to the business case, that's where usually that kind of I guess the sort of CEO level, etc., will get the additional motivation to embed it, I would say, within their strategy. Now, obviously, the work still needs to be done in embedding that holistically as an organizational culture to then, move forward. So that's, I would say, the sort of corporate side. And I would always say it's a bit of slow going, but for those people, I would say have an entrepreneurial hat on. So they should think of themselves as entrepreneurs, but within the sort of safety or security of an organization. So, don't leverage that security while you're there and try and test things, go out and actually be very focused on, I would say, on the success metrics, the impact, the things that are actually very measurable and quantifiable that you can map back to an actual tangible business case. And that's just because that's how they like to speak, and that's how, at the end of the day, when they're reporting back to their investors, those are the things that they'll be looking for. Now, the other side, which I think is also very relevant, and that comes down to, I would say, also the responsibility that some of these larger organizations have as part of the industry, where this is an industry that's made up of sort of, 95% SMEs, individuals, sole traders, etc. And you find that most of the technologies, fortunately or unfortunately, they tend to sometimes be a bit of a barrier to these SMEs because they are so expensive, or, having to, they can almost sometimes feel a bit like overkill because, they're almost like enterprise level, platforms or tools that actually all, someone might need potentially is to just, connect their spreadsheets or something. So what I would say is there is a responsibility that the larger players have with regards to how do we make these technologies more interoperable, firstly, so that they can be more affordable, and then they're more accessible and actually inclusive. And then people can actually start to experiment with what I'd call like digital transformation and technology. So this is actually a little bit of a segue into my startup and what I do. So my startup's called Techie. It's a bit of an ironic name, actually, in that, it is really because I wanted everyone to be able to get the most or get the best out of the technology that they use. And again, obviously for us to be able to, live safely and comfortably, play, work, all of these things. Now, what I found that kept happening, or I realized that you almost kind of fall into two camps. You're either taught technology, as in, you go through all of the motions and you're able to, be in a role where you're really embroiled in it and you gain it that way, or you're basically, you have to experiment with it, fail with it, test, play around. And most people don't have the time or the capacity or the capability to do that, because most people, they want an outcome. They want to be able to just, I need this. So they want to press on something and they want it to do that. So in a sense, what we need are, we need that space to learn, to grow, to fail with it, to experiment. And right now, those SMEs, they don't have that resource. They just don't. So that's where, the bigger players have, in my opinion, the responsibility and a bit of an onus to open that up a bit.
Yeah,
and
it's a very politically correct answer. I congratulate you about this. This is fantastic. So thank you very much for that. But yeah, I think that Enrique, he was just pointing into the very just interesting direction, saying that if you're just CEO of the big company, you don't see all of these things which you're saying, and you're not interested on the information management part because you think it's somebody will do this. But these guys do not understand they need to be role models to really drive this kind of things. And I'm not think so is a generational problem. I just want to remind Enrique that we have like a 2 generation between us, right? But it's just it's something which is more related to the industry, the safety. They don't want to they want to step out. They don't want to test something. They feel comfortable where they are, and they just don't want to experiment something which is new. And I'm really struggling. And we are together with Enrique. We're struggling with just when we talk to the big bosses, is just to really just to get them into the details. The one things which I learned, you need to be, of course, the high level, and you need to manage the company, and you need to understand the strategic parts. But if you do not understand the way how the pipes working on the bottom of the building, of course, it's just it's an illustration. You will not be able just to put properly strategy going forward. And sometimes we can see that this is disconnect between the strategy of the company and the big words, etc., and with the execution. You are the big fan of ESG, right? That you can see it as well. You can see the company saying we are green. We did it because of we have a training for the employees to do the right stuff. And when you start to talking to the CEO, so how many times you're taking the flight instead of the train, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I need to take a flight because it's faster," right? And I hear you, but you're not walking the talk, right? So I see this problem, Shakirah. So just maybe it's not really a BIM, but it's really the transformation of the big companies in the construction industry.
So,
okay,
this isn't a built environment specific issue, in that, again, for me, I feel it comes back down to, firstly, I would say, because we've touched upon ESG, ESG, I would say, has also, similar to BIM, kind of come in sort of buzzwordy. Actually, people haven't really understood CSR, which actually, when you really understand CSR, you can comply with ESG, and ESG is just a way of measuring your social responsibility, right? And how well you're embedding everything, again, from a holistic perspective. So I guess for those CEOs, etc., at the end of the day, again, going back to that iceberg of ignorance, there's only so much that they will really be able to, be involved in terms of the detail, all the time. Like, yes, they might have instances where they can come in and sort of, play, I've forgotten the word for it, but, come in and maybe inspect something, or sitting in a meeting just to see what, different things are like in their organization. But for them, for the most part, they answer to investors, right? They answer to certain stakeholders. So again, that's why it's like being able to speak to these things in the context of their business case or the business plan and the strategy really and truly is what, the leaders at the top are kind of looking for. And now it's about, how do we embed this into the organization as a culture, right? As a culture, because that's then going to feed into everything else in terms of our processes, in terms of even, how we keep and manage data, how we communicate across different departments, how we engage with our supply chain and suppliers, how we engage with various, other stakeholders. So that's really, to me, where it comes down to. And culture really is led by and created by the leadership, but obviously contributed to by everyone within that organization. But it's one of those top-down type scenarios. So that's been my biggest lesson, and that's why the whole angel investing and investment side of things comes in, because really understanding, okay, where are these pots of money, right? And where do, like, what really is motivating this CEO, and being able to speak to them in that context. Because here's the reality: they're not going to care about all of the other various bits that you care about. They don't necessarily care about the how rather. Like, they want the executive summary and the outcomes.
no, but
So we also need to get better, I would say, at being able to tell that story. And that's where, again, I was saying, for those who are in those particular difficult roles, wear a bit of an, entrepreneurial hat just within the context of your organization. So do the research, connect with investors and funders, create a business case, etc. for it, and use that to have that conversation with regards to the strategy. But think about, or rather don't forget that it's really something that needs to bleed in and be embedded into the organization's culture. Because yeah, you can have processes and systems all day long, but they don't necessarily change the things. It's the people, right? So
it's a fascinating debate, because I think we're touching something which is not BIM, but is just the way how the world is structured in terms of the financials, in terms of the investors, in terms of the way how economic works. Because I completely disagree with you. Unfortunately, I apologize for doing this just online in front of everybody, but I don't think so. The important part is the growth and when you're an investor, you're expecting the return of your capital. You're not expecting the return for the well-being of the planet, right? So each of the investors will go and just say, I want to have 10% more, and that will be against most of the goals which we have it from the saving the planet, right? So
doesn't that depend on the investor?
It's just, if you would like to have a happy living, you still need to get some money back to make sure that you have a bread at the end of the day, right? So you just put some capital and you just want to buy a bread and butter at the end, right? So I think the whole model is just not really well thought through, right? But
so I agree, but that's what I'm saying. At the end of the day, we have to play the game. So you have a CEO who has to answer to an investor, right? And that. So for you to be able to get what you need from that CEO, for you to implement the things that comply, let's say, with CSR, or, get that building safe, or, get all of the occupants achieving a great health and well-being score, you need to put that in the context of what that CEO is going to understand to approve. That's all I'm saying. So absolutely, the world is broken, but we don't kind of just sit there and be like, okay, cool, the world is broken. We have to figure out innovative ways to work with this broken world to change it. So yes, there are investors and private equity funds that are terrible, in my opinion, and are even, we hear about these all day, the idea of like unicorns and whatnot, where there are actual founders and entrepreneurs who their whole purpose for the business goes completely in a different direction because of some funding that they've had. We see it every single day. But there are also impact-driven angel syndicates and funds. There are green funds, there are insurers, there are all kinds of organizations now with capital who do care, and they are looking at these things, and they don't like greenwashing, and they don't care about the fact that the CEO, all he cares about potentially is the return. So part of that is also being able to, again, look at where are these funds, identifying them, connecting those dots, etc. But also, I think having a bit of optimism in the fact that, yes, although there are things that are happening in the world that aren't, at the end of the day, very positive or leading to positive things, there are a lot of other things at the end of the day that are, and what we need is a bit more awareness, a bit more exposure, a bit more buy-in to them. So absolutely, I agree. That's not necessarily the way things are at the moment, but there is a lot happening to change that. Like, just quite recently, I was at a talk with JLL, and one of the, I think, his name's Guy Granger. He was talking about this particular point exactly. And so there is a lot happening, and there are significant changes to come. There's been, let's say, even just taking apart the E and the S and the G, there's been a lot of focus, let's say, sometimes on just one of them. So, we can talk about governance all day long in the context of politics or whatever. We can talk about the social aspects as well all day long too. But then there's the ESG, so the environmental. But how are we connecting these things too? There's also the aspects of, there's so many people, again, waiting for the right information before they'll take action. Well, actually, there are instances where we have enough of the historical information, but actually we need to start being brave enough to propose certain things, certain targets, and just go and aim for them. So yeah.
I think that's the reason why I just really love to work with the on the BIM Cafe, the interviews and discussions, because we're really touching the different topics, and this one is really very close to my heart, because I really would like to change the industry with all of my experience, what I have for the last 30 30 years of the experience of transforming the businesses. But one thing which I really still don't get it is just the resistance of the guys just to not implementing the digital flows in the construction industry. And that's really what you were saying. It's just it will dramatically increase all of our impact for the environment, for the sustainability, for everything which you would like, just to name it, because you can just, I can see it even from the basic things like properly planning productions of the ABC material for the construction. I can save 20-30% of energy instead of producing this on stock and making sure that I will just ship it in the moment when it's ready. So I can see this for the whole value chain, saying, if I can just go through this, and I don't see that, why are people resisting? I don't get it. We haven't found, Enrique, the way, the bullet, the golden bullet, really, just to say, my God, that's how it should work. Everybody is resisting. I don't get it.
I have another reason for this resistance, and so it's one that I was speaking to one of my colleagues about yesterday, actually, and it's the fact that in our industry there are a lot of middlemen. Like, let's be real, there are a lot of middle people. So there's a lot of people who need and want to take money or make money off of some margin that isn't necessarily adding any value. So we have a lot of that in our industry, actually, in terms of just the culture. So when we talk about some of these changes, it means certain people aren't getting the money that they would have gotten before. So yes, they will absolutely be resistant to it. So there's that part. And again, going back to the investment part, there are things that we just need to invest in and know that, okay, we're not going to get an immediate return on, or that return isn't going to happen, and it's not going to look like this. Some things we actually just need to invest to build the actual thing that will then create the value, which, some might look at it as a loss. To me, it isn't, because, if we don't do that, then we're not going to get potentially the solution that will then sort of change. So I hear you, and I think that's one of the difficulties that we have currently in our industry. And I think the only way that that's starting to sort of change is with each person's almost like specific discipline having a particular, what I'd call almost like a digital sort of like mirror to it. So if you take apart literally each of the different components of, a development, every single person effectively can be displaced by some technology, right? Which can be scary or not, as in you can either choose to learn something so that your position is still secure and you can continue to add value, or you look at it with fear as though, oh, my role will no longer kind of exist. So you create resistance, and that resistance can be known in various ways. It can be with the contracts that are chosen. It could be, choosing the wrong suppliers because, it can look so different in so many different ways. And I think that's sometimes a problem. Ultimately, though, unfortunately, the client and the end users are the ones that end up paying as a result most of the time.
Very good. Yeah,
and this is the fear of the unknown.
Say it again.
Sorry, I would say, Peter, that this is only the fear. The fear we're talking about, those people who think they're going to get replaced by machines. It's a fear of something you don't know. It's a fear of the unknown. It's just you don't know what's going to happen, and I'm going to lose whatever I have, instead of thinking how I can adapt myself or how can I learn new things. Right? It's the fear of the unknown. We're talking before about all this. Is that what you said before? I feel like they cannot afford to fail. They can try something new. If they fail, they're gone.
And
that's it.
Yeah.
Whether the others, bigger ones, can try and fail, but they don't try because we want to keep making more, right? Or they try to be like, see 10,000 SMEs failing or succeeding, so they know they're gonna hit the good target.
Exactly that. Absolutely, exactly that. And when we go back to, let's say, the responsibility that I feel these larger organizations have, it's things like, I would love to, like partnering, let's say, with people who can facilitate some of these like trainings and scenarios where you can demonstrate these benefits and outcomes to SMEs before they're having to commit or even invest themselves. Because it's very easy for an SME these days. I mean, you just really kind of just look at, let's say, examples like Carillion, where, loads of SMEs will end up going bankrupt or bust because of the mistake of one large contractor. Like things like this happen all the time. So you find a lot of SMEs are kind of at the mercy of them. So they're quite wary of that. And that's why it's like we have to change things, and it has to be a bit more right. There's a responsibility that we have, and that responsibility, again, whether it's legislated or whether it's, through, again, investment and certain funds by, making right, if you do this, etc., then you can have access to this and so on and so forth. I think it's either through politics or money that these changes will really kind of be driven. And again, part of that, just to again like shout out angel investing, one of the reasons really that I went into that is because, so as a Black female who's also Muslim, right, it's so hard to run a business. It's so hard to access capital for the things that we need to be able to develop the good things. Just even generally SMEs from diverse or disadvantaged backgrounds, it's very difficult. So we need more of us, ironically, in the spaces where we can shape and divert where that money is going, where we can inform some of those people who, manage these funds, etc., to be a bit more aware of, okay, this particular intervention or this particular research is happening, so that, again, money can actually be diverted towards the things that we need to be developed so that we can get the outcomes that we need and solve the problems that we have. So yeah, I would say you should all become angel investors. Check out Andy Aham's Angel Investing School, by the way. So on that note, funnily enough, we have, I would say, a lot to learn from the sort of tech startup ecosystem in there. I'd say they're very sort of agile mentality. I mean, they may not be perfect with it because obviously there's a lot of technology out there that is completely and utterly useless and not fit for purpose. So we'll ignore that aspect. But the whole idea of iterating, creating feedback loops, being about value and delivering value quickly, learning from mistakes, all of these things we need to really adopt very quickly. And we need to, we need to do it as soon as possible. And leadership, clients, owners, especially, portfolio managers, asset managers, especially, I think, because they're at the top a lot of the time of who informs that, they have the oxygen, as they say. They really, in my opinion, have the responsibility and the real onus, to disseminate that, to feed that through, to allow that to really, be embedded as holistic practices again and cultures to shape these things. So yeah.
Fantastic discussion, Shakirah. I really appreciate that we share our thoughts together. I hope our viewers will find it also interesting. We touched a couple of the very important parts, I think, in terms of the change of the industry. We haven't really covered the most of the technology part, but I think that was really, we have it for all of the thousands other seasons and thousands other episodes. So I think that's really good. But I think if we wish to start, I really think you really have the right key to the success of transforming the way how the people use it, informations, etc., etc. So it's really grateful to have you with us, and thank you very much for sharing all of your thoughts. Enrique, any final thoughts, any final comments, what you would like to add?
Yeah, I feel we prepared the structure of the interview for nothing, right? Because we're discussing here everything but BIM and data. No, it was fantastic, Shakirah. I appreciate that. As Peter said, it's great to have different voices and topics around and talking about new things. And I sense so much energy here. I'm willing to do some changes. So let's see if it happens. I want to just add a last thought that we haven't discussed much about the information, the data, and the BIM. And I think that when we're talking about what you need to bring to this executive summary to the CIOs on the top of the pyramid to make the change happen is the numbers, the information. That's why we believe on the power of the data, and that's where we say BIM needs to focus. And Peter is putting a face that he doesn't agree with me. I don't know.
No. I agree with you all the time. I'm just only thinking about the stuff which you said, that these guys are just the old guys, and we have between you and me, it's 2 generations. So I'm just thinking still about it. So that's where I am still.
Well, Shakirah, fantastic. If you have something else you want to add, otherwise we start to close the interview.
Yeah, look, I was just going to say thank you very much, both of you, so Peter and Enrique. Last point on that, funnily enough, was, I guess, with regards to The other side, so buildings and occupation. So another thing that I've done as well is I've encountered so many different like facilities managers, right, who are managing buildings, and they've had the buildings to manage for, 5, 10, 15 years. And I kid you not, we can go in for that first time and we'll be showing them how to set their building management system in a way that actually helps them optimize the energy and comfort of their building. And some of these things, again, come back to when we go back to their office and we're asking them, like, where's your FM information? Like, where's the Colby, or where is this BIM model, etc., or the information that you had, etc.? Where is your handover and aftercare stuff? They're pulling out big folders, 12 thick Word folders full of paper, right, and 10 million manuals that were just like, yeah, this is ridiculous. So funnily enough, just to kind of tie back to that, there is definitely a need for better information, which benefits everyone across the board, and not even just in construction, but even just actually facilitating and optimizing these properties and buildings. Again, even for these like asset owners and portfolio managers and investors, so that their money that they're actually spending isn't just being pulled down the drain. But yeah, that was just a last note from me.
Very good. Thank you very much. We're looking forward to meet you just after the end of the Ramadan. We can just go for the real coffee together. So it will be great to see you in person. So I hope it will be good just on when we will be around. So just to spend the time and discuss it. And just again, once more, thank you very much for your time and the participation. So it's really, really great to have you with us. And I hope our viewers, guys, you will just also enjoy it. So make the comments if you will be watching it later on. Put some thoughts about it, what you just heard from us.
Thank you very much.
And subscribe to the channel. Spread, share, because this is the way we have to grow.
This is different generations. Please subscribe to our channel. That's I'm always forgetting these things. Yes.
Thank you both for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shakirah. Bye.
Thank you.